Hey guys, having trouble sleeping tonight again? Let's take a slow walk back, way back into a time before bedtime routines, before pillows and podcasts, before even time itself had a proper schedule. Picture this. The sky isn't quite a sky yet. It sort of trembles unformed. The sea is more of an anxious puddle, and the earth, well, she's still figuring out which way is up. You float disoriented in the warm murk of chaos, where the very first beings are stretching and yawning themselves into existence. You probably won't survive this. I mean, mortals don't tend to do well where gods and titans are born, but you'll be fine. Probably. Don't forget to subscribe and share this channel with someone who loves soft bedtime stories. Tonight, let your mind drift along with us, and may this soothing story help you find the sweetest dreams. Go ahead, comment your local time and where you're listening from. Or if you're feeling brave, share what's been on your mind. We all carry a little too much around some nights. Take a slow, deep breath, settle into your favorite spot, and let the gentle rhythm of this story carry you far from today's worries. Now open your eyes to nothing. Really, there is literally nothing. No stars, no sun, no buildings, no Starbucks. Just an immense void humming gently with potential. From this shapeless soup crawls the first power Gaia Earth herself, rolling into being with the quiet rumble of stone shifting. She's not alone for long. Uranus follows the sky, stretching over her, cold and distant, yet drawn to her warmth. They're not your typical couple. Think less rom-com, more cosmic horticulture. Together they begin producing children at an alarming rate. Giants with 100 arms, one-eyed builders, even more titans, all of them a bit intense. But Uranus, sky dad extraordinaire, isn't quite ready for noisy kids. So, in an overreaction worthy of future therapy, he shoves them back inside Gaia's womb. Yes, inside. That's where you grimace and shift a little under your blanket. Poor Gaia groans in pain, aching with crowded children and betrayal. Historians still argue whether this myth hints at ancient cultural fears of overpopulation or something darker. Either way, she's not thrilled, so she crafts a plan. She whispers to her son Cronus, the youngest titan, with a sharp mind and an even sharper sickle. She coaxes him to stand up to do what no one has dared. You stand beside him now, barefoot on the unformed earth, while the sky above grows heavy with thunderless pressure. And then, just like that, the first rebellion is born. One night, as Uranus lowers himself again over Gaia, well, Cronus leaps out of the darkness and slices. No need for gruesome details, it's bedtime after all. But let's just say the sky won't be fathering any more children. The drops that fall into the sea, they'll become goddesses, monsters, and even Aphrodite one day. Cronus stands triumphant, glowing faintly with the borrowed glory of the act. He takes control. He becomes king of the cosmos. But this new ruler has inherited one very bad habit: fear. Specifically the fear that one day one of his children will do to him what he did to dear old dad. Paranoia, it turns out, runs in the family. Back then, stories weren't written on scrolls. They were carved in winds and echoed in caves. But if they had libraries, this would be filed under Epic Mistakes Parenting Edition. Cronus marries his sister Rhea because divine matchmaking has limited options, and they begin having children. It starts well enough. A bouncing baby. Hestia, then Hera, then Hades, and each time, just as Rhea begins to swaddle the child, Cronus calmly opens his mouth and gulps. Straight down. No gag, no chew. Just slurp. Now this wasn't entirely unheard of in ancient myth. One Egyptian text describes a sun god swallowing his own children to preserve their power until rebirth. But Cronus, he's not interested in rebirth. He's just scared out of his golden mind. Rhea, meanwhile, is understandably not loving this situation. You walk beside her now through the shadowy meadows of a still young earth, her arms empty and her heart weary. The gods inside Cronus continue to live barely curled in uneasy stasis, but Rhea longs to break the cycle. And finally, when her 6th child is born, she's had enough. You help her sneak through starlight to a remote island Crete, a rocky dot in the swelling Mediterranean. There she hides the newborn in a dripping cave and wraps a stone in swaddling cloth. When Cronus comes calling with that eerie expectant smile, she hands him the bundle. He swallows the rock with a contented sigh and shuffles off to rule the cosmos, none the wiser. That baby, his name is Zeus, and like all good revolutionaries, he grows up in hiding. Fed by the goat Amalthea, guarded by nymphs, and trained in secrets whispered by trees older than memory. You sit at the mouth of that cave now. It smells of moss and warm milk, the air buzzing faintly with the energy of destiny. The child giggles, playing with sparks that tickle his fingers. Around you, the world holds its breath. Somewhere far away, Cronus smiles in his sleep. He dreams he has won, but not for long. You're still in that cave, nestled between damp stone and the quiet crunch of moss, watching little Zeus crawl around with a half smirk, like he already knows he's going to shake the world someday. Above you, the sky is slowly learning to be blue, and the stars are just barely figuring out how to twinkle. Time passes strangely here. You blink, and suddenly the infant is a youth, strong, clever, with that gleam in his eye that says, "I'm plotting something, but you'll forgive me because I'm charming." And he is. Even the nymphs can't stay mad when he steals honey or turns the river into wine just for the fun of it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, or what counts as the other side when the earth is still ironing out its edges, Cronus is feeling quite pleased with himself. He's swallowed every child Rhea gave him. The threat is contained. The throne is secure. Everything is fine, except for the burping. Turns out swallowing 5 divine beings and a rock gives you some serious indigestion. Ancient myth never tells us what that felt like, but you imagine Cronus groaning, holding his stomach, wondering why his god-sized tums aren't working. But let's not feel too bad for him, because Rhea finally fed up with all the deception and second-guessing whispers to Zeus from afar. It's time. Time to take back what was lost, to free his siblings, to fulfill the old cracking prophecy. Zeus descends from his mountain hiding place, already taller than most trees, his voice deeper than thunder. And with him comes Metis, the clever titaness of cunning and wisdom. She doesn't shout or wave a sword, she just hands Zeus a potion. A curious little brew designed to do the opposite of what Cronus did to his children. Instead of swallowing, Cronus will unswallow. You slip into the palace of the gods with Zeus, now hidden beneath a golden veil of mist. You hear Cronus boasting to his brothers, sipping divine nectar, laughing that throaty titan laugh. Zeus enters all smiles and good manners, offering a drink as a gesture of peace. Cronus gulps it down. And that's when the rumbles begin. First a shiver through his stomach, then a twist, a wrench, a boom. Suddenly out flies a fully grown Poseidon, gasping like he just stepped out of a very weird dream. Then Hera, Hades, Demeter, and finally Hestia, all blinking in confusion, dusting themselves off and looking around like, wait, did we miss something? Historians still argue whether this tale of swallowing and regurgitation was a symbolic retelling of generational struggle, or just the ancient world's version of how not to do parenting. Either way, it's definitely not in the modern medical textbooks. What matters is that now, for the first time, Zeus is not alone. His siblings gods, in their own right, gather around him, eyes blazing with purpose. They've been inside Cronus for years. They're cranky, underfed, and absolutely ready to start some drama. Now picture this, a family reunion powered by vengeance. Zeus wastes no time. He takes up command, not just because he's clever or tall or has great hair, though all of that helps, but because he believes. Believes in a world where time isn't ruled by fear. where mortals might one day rise and thrive, where fate can be something you mold, not something that swallows you whole. But the Titans, oh, they aren't going to take this quietly. They may be old, but they're vast, elemental, and deeply annoyed. Cronus calls to them from Mount Othrys, his fortress of stone and shadow, and one by one, the elder gods rise. Oceanus coils like a serpent, Hyperion burns with solar fury, and Iapetus cracks the ground with every step. The war begins, not with a scream, but with a silence so deep, it hushes the wind. This is the Titanomachy, the war that would reshape the very bones of the world. And you, sleepy traveler, are standing at the edge of it. Between two mountain strongholds, Olympus to the north, Othrys to the south, echoes begin to rumble. The air feels charged. Lightning flickers on the horizon. Trees lean away, as if even they want no part of this. Zeus calls his siblings together. Hades, who commands the quiet death beneath the earth. Poseidon, who swirls the seas like mixing paint. Hera, eyes fierce with strategy. Demeter with the patient strength of the growing world. Hestia, glowing warm and steady at the center. They form the new vanguard, but they're still outnumbered, still outclassed. Titans are, after all, older than memory. They've built palaces into the marrow of mountains. Their voices can start avalanches. They laugh in centuries. So Zeus turns to the forgotten ones. Deep beneath the crust of the earth in the dark pits of Tartarus, 3 figures stir. They have 100 hands each, 50 heads. They are the Hecatonchires creatures, so terrifying even Cronus once locked them away like a bad dream. And beside them, the Cyclopes. Not the one-eyed monsters of later legends, but divine smiths of thunder builders of the first fire and keepers of unspoken power. Zeus doesn't hesitate. He cracks open the prison gates himself. You descend with him now into Tartarus. It smells of ash and iron. Every breath feels heavier. But the moment the chains fall, the air shimmers. The Cyclopes blink into the light and smile, their single eyes burning with promise. One offers Zeus a gift, a weapon unlike any seen before. A bolt of lightning, forged from storm and fury. Crackling with raw judgment, it fits into Zeus's hand like it always belonged there. Another Cyclops gives Poseidon a trident, 3-pronged and humming with oceanic wrath. And Hades. He receives a helmet that melts him into shadow, unseen, untraceable. The gods rise from the pit, not just freed, but armed. And the Titans. While they're about to have a very bad day, you don't ease into a divine war. You fall into it like tripping over a thundercloud. By now, you're standing at the edge of Olympus barefoot, on stone that hums beneath your soles. Zeus stands beside you. Lightning bolt raised his gaze, stretching across the horizon to Mount Othrys. You'd think the world would hesitate, blink twice, whisper, "Are you sure?" But no. It charges headlong into catastrophe like a toddler with scissors. The war begins with a scream, not from the gods, not from the Titans, but from the earth herself. Gaia, weary and torn between her ancient Titan children and these new godlings, groans as armies churn across her skin. Trees are uprooted, rivers recoil, even the wind seems nervous. You duck instinctively as the first bolt flies. Zeus throws it not at a Titan, but into the clouds above a warning shot that splits the sky in half. Thunder doesn't follow, it proceeds. The sound rolls backward through time as if the heavens themselves are being rewound and then played again at twice the volume. From the mountain opposite, Cronus responds not with words, but with a gesture. A Titan to his left, Cohus maybe lifts a jagged piece of mountain and hurls it like a child tossing a stone. It whistles past your head, hits the slope behind you, and explodes into shards. So begins the first real day of the Titanomachy. You press yourself into the dirt and watch as Olympus transforms. The gods move like dancers in a storm. Hestia builds barriers of flame circling the mountain's base. Poseidon slams his trident into the rocks, and water bursts upward in spiraling shields. Hera flies overhead, hurling shouts that rattle your teeth. But it's not just gods and titans in the fight. Remember those Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones. You see them now barefoot and giant slapping boulders at enemy lines like toddlers playing dodgeball with volcanoes. One of them even laughs as he catches a flaming tree mid-air and flings it back with a flick of his 12th wrist. It's terrifying. It's also kind of amazing. The Cyclopes stay behind the lines. They don't fight. They forge. With each strike of their hammers, the ground shudders. New weapons emerge still steaming. Shields etched with stars. Spears made of lightning-fused iron. You even see one crafting a sword with a blade so thin it disappears when turned sideways. Historians still argue whether this war was meant to symbolize the shift from old elemental power to more reasoned ordered force. But if you're standing here watching two mountains throw tantrums across a bruised sky, it doesn't feel very reasonable. It feels like the world is trying to decide what it wants to be. One strange detail. No one dies. Not really. Titans and gods may fall, may vanish in screams and bursts of colored smoke, but they don't stay gone. Every wound heals. Every exile ends in some new shape. It's like the war itself is alive, playing both sides like a drama queen refusing to write an ending. You shuffle behind Zeus now as he takes the high ground. His siblings form a crescent around him, Poseidon grumbling about terrain, Hera muttering tactical instructions like a general with a grudge, Hades vanishing and reappearing where he's least expected. And then comes the clash. The armies crash into each other with no fanfare, just thunder and muscle and centuries of repressed fury. You watch as titans sprout wings made of starlight and charge the sky. Gods answer with waves of gold fire boiling the air. Storms spin in tight funnels, tearing at anything without divine blood. And through it all, Zeus moves like he's been here before. He commands without shouting, leads without pushing. He's not the strongest, not yet, but he believes the most. And belief is everything in a world where thought can shape matter and rage can sculpt mountains. You feel the heat of a titan's breath as one crashes near, roaring in a voice older than sound. Before you can flinch, a glimmering shield blocks the impact, Hera again rolling her eyes. Like this is just another Thursday. There are moments of beauty, even here. A comet of sparks trails behind Demeter as she runs through the battlefield, vines blooming in her wake, only to wither seconds later. Hestia holds a line with nothing but steady flame and whispered prayers. And Hades, clever Hades, slips behind enemy ranks like smoke, stealing weapon secrets, and maybe even hope. One night, as you lie curled behind a broken altar, you see something curious. Prometheus, the titan of forethought, sneaking into the Olympian camp. He isn't throwing rocks. He's carrying a satchel filled with scrolls, sketches, maps. You hear him whisper to Zeus under a stunted olive tree. "You're not winning," he says. "You're just not losing yet." Prometheus offers advice, strategy warnings. He points at Cronus and says things like, he always fights better after fasting, and don't let Iapetus near the rivers, he bends water. You watch the two of them form a plan, heads bowed close, lightning reflecting in both pairs of eyes. It's the first crack in Titan loyalty. And maybe, just maybe, it's the beginning of something bigger. Because suddenly, the gods aren't reacting. They're striking first, setting traps, using the terrain, whispering to the elements, and Cronus. For the first time, he hesitates. You feel it in the ground. The gods are learning, and the titans. They're realizing that brute strength might not be enough anymore. The cave you once hid in is far behind now. You've followed the gods into a war that's no longer just explosions and flying mountains. It's turning into something more complex, more calculated. If the early days were fire and chaos, now it's strategy and nerve. The kind of nerve it takes to sit quietly while the enemy stares at you across a burning ravine, daring you to blink first. Zeus doesn't blink. You're beside him as he crouches in the half-light tracing plans into the dirt with a twig. The war has dragged on for years now, 10 if you're counting. But up here time bends. Seasons forget to change. Even the stars seem stuck holding their breath. Somewhere behind the clouds, mortals are beginning to form little villages, build fires, and wonder why the sky growls so often. It's because 2 generations of immortals still refuse to quit. Tonight, Zeus and his siblings are preparing a risky maneuver. They've been chipping away at Titan strongholds one boulder at a time, but progress is slow and Cronus keeps slipping away like a shadow behind stone. So the plan is simple: break the rules. Which, let's be honest, gods are very good at. Zeus calls a secret council beneath the roots of a dead tree. You're there listening to the hiss of torches, the low growl of Poseidon pacing. Demeter hums quietly, fingers weaving flower crowns for a morale boost. Even Hades looks unusually tense, which says a lot for a god who wears death like a fashion statement. And then you hear it, the idea. We take the fight into Othris, Zeus says. Not a raid, not an ambush. A full-scale storming of the Titan mountain itself. The heart of their power. The stronghold that's never been breached. It's bold. It's borderline reckless. It's classic Zeus. Historians still argue whether Mount Othris was ever a real place. Some say it's a mythic metaphor for ancestral authority. Others say it was inspired by real mountains in central Greece. Either way, you're about to sneak up it like a squirrel with a grudge. The gods move at dusk. You tiptoe behind them, slipping through fog so thick it muffles even Hera's whispered complaints. The Titans, cocky after a week of calm, are unprepared. At first, but it doesn't last. The ambush sparks like dry leaves catching flame. One shout, and suddenly it's all crashing walls and stampeding giants. You're scrambling through a corridor of fire, ducking under swinging stone clubs. Hades vanishes entirely, classic move, while Poseidon bursts through a hallway like a tsunami in sandals. Hera hurls beams of energy with pinpoint fury, knocking Titans off balance. And then you see Zeus. He doesn't run or dodge. He walks, lightning already forming in his palm. He calls Cronus by name, not as a challenge, but like a child calling a parent out for breaking a promise. And Cronus answers. You can feel it before you see him. The air around you thickens. The gravity tips sideways. Then he steps out, towering and calm, his sickle gleaming with memory. His eyes are tired but not weak. He's ruled for eons. He doesn't fear his children. He pities them. Still playing at war boy, he asks, voice deeper than thunder. Zeus doesn't flinch. You've forgotten how to lose, he says. I came to remind you. There's no official bell or trumpet. But when they meet in the center of Othris's great hall, all the world seems to stop. It's father and son. King and challenger. End of an age versus beginning of a new one. And the room explodes. Cronus moves like a landslide, his blade carving silence into the air. Zeus counters with lightning arcs of white-hot power, slashing sideways through pillars. They are not just fighting, they are undoing reality in every blow. Walls melt, shadows scream. Even time loops once or twice for good measure. And you cling to a broken stone lion and try not to throw up. The Titans rush in to protect their king, but the gods have anticipated that. Hestia holds the line at the door, a ring of fire keeping the worst at bay. Demeter summons thorns as tall as trees. Poseidon floods half the corridor, sweeping lesser Titans into confusion. But it's not enough. Cronus is older, stronger, wiser in ways that make your skin crawl. Just as he corners Zeus, pinning him under rubble, readying the sickle for a final stroke, you spot a flash in the dark. It's Metis. She's been watching the whole time, quiet and patient. And now she hurls something toward Zeus. Not a weapon, a mirror. It lands beside him with a soft clang, catching Cronus's reflection just as he raises the blade. And for a moment, Cronus sees himself. Not the king, not the father, just a frightened god who once betrayed his own kin. The hesitation is only a breath, but Zeus doesn't waste it. With a cry that splits the ceiling, Zeus launches one final bolt, point blank. It hits Cronus square in the chest and shatters the sickle in his hand. Cronus doesn't scream. He just fades, not into death, but into myth and the mountain. It begins to fall. You run, you stumble, you leap over chunks of stone. Gods and titans scatter alike as Mount Othrys groans and splits down the middle. Above you, the sky cracks open, not in anger, but in relief. The war is not over, but something has changed. Cronus has fallen, and now the gods are no longer just rebels. They are rulers. You crawl from the rubble like a stunned beetle ash in your hair and the scent of ozone curling in your nose. Around you, the mountain that once shook with titan laughter now sighs like a wounded beast. Othrys is broken, not obliterated, but humbled. Stones still fall in slow clatters, dust floats like fog, and the fires begin to die down with the exhausted grace of a tantrum finally burned out. Zeus stands amid the ruins, shoulders heaving, his chest streaked with soot. His hand still grips the hilt of his now spent lightning bolt, and though his eyes are fierce, his limbs tremble. The war isn't over, but Cronus has been brought low. You look around expecting celebration. Instead, there's silence, because Cronus didn't fall alone. His absence has unbalanced the battlefield. Titans loyal to him waver confused. Others, like Oceanus, seem strangely calm. You watch as Oceanus slowly retreats from the fray, slinking back into the misted boundaries of the world's rivers, mumbling something about neutrality and the unfairness of time. The war, it seems, is no longer a single war. It's fractured into whispers, alliances, and uneasy standoffs. And as the Titans pause to reassess the gods, they do what all newly victorious siblings do argue. Poseidon wants to press the advantage. Strike now, he says, slamming his trident into the dirt, before they regroup. Hera folds her arms. We're exhausted. We've lost 2 watchposts and half our storm nymphs. Demeter mutters, I've had to regrow the same forest 6 times. 6. Zeus holds up a hand. You'd expect him to side with Poseidon, but he doesn't. Instead, he turns to the shadow at the edge of the group. Hades, he says. The name curls through the wind like a chill draft, and from the shadows, he steps forward. Quiet. Hooded. That helmet, the gift of the Cyclopes, seems to melt him into half-existence. We need sabotage, he says simply. Not another brawl. And just like that, a new tactic blooms. See, while Zeus and Poseidon are the loud, flashy ones, Hades. He's the one who listens, who waits, who studies where the cracks are forming, and he's found them deep in the Titan ranks. So you follow him now, cloaked in shadows, slipping through battlefields, still steaming from the last confrontation. You pass burnt-out altars, shattered statues, and a river that now runs sideways because Poseidon got moody. And finally, you arrive at a Titan camp. Not a grand palace, no. Just a jagged shelf of rock where Hyperion sharpens a blade made of starlight, and Themis paces, muttering prophecies to herself like a stressed-out weather woman. And there, just beyond the edge, you see Prometheus again? Still a Titan. Still technically the enemy. But he keeps glancing toward Olympus when he thinks no one's watching. You see, Prometheus has ideas. Big ones. About progress. About change. About how fire should belong to everyone, not just the upper management. And more than that, he's tired. Tired of obeying orders written before he was fully aware of his own mind. So, Hades doesn't threaten him. He simply offers a choice. You already left your father once, he says. What's stopping you now? Prometheus frowns. Fear, maybe. Good Hades replies. Then you're ready. And just like that, another crack appears in the Titan wall. Prometheus begins feeding Olympus information, battle plans, supply routes, hidden forges. He warns them that Cronus's sickle wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol. Now broken, the Titans are leaderless, yes, but also aimless. Some whisper of retreat. Others talk of retribution. A few start mumbling about surrender. You return with Hades unseen back to Olympus, where the mood has shifted. The gods are not just fighters anymore, they're organizers, builders. Schematics spread across golden tables. Nymphs pore over maps. Even the Hecatonchires have taken to crafting siege towers with unnerving cheer. But the most surprising shift, Zeus starts listening more. To Hera's strategies. To Demeter's warnings about scorched earth. To Hestia's insistence on protecting mortal settlements caught in the crossfire. Historians still argue whether this moment, the shift from brute warfare to a more structured cooperative campaign, marked the birth of divine order. Some call it the First Council. Others say it was just a lucky break. But from your front row seat on a mossy boulder, it feels like something deeper. The gods are learning to rule. And the Titans, they feel it. You walk with Prometheus through the twilight between camps, listening to him murmur about a world where mortals shape their own fate. He sketches ideas in the dirt tools, agriculture, the concept of law. You realize he's already thinking beyond this war. Beyond Zeus even. He's thinking future. And yet, not everyone's thrilled. Epimetheus, his brother, keeps trying to warn him. You're going to get chained to a rock for this, he says. Prometheus just shrugs. Worth it. You chuckle, but a chill creeps up your spine. The war isn't over, not even close. But you sense that the outcome is beginning to solidify. Zeus, once hidden in a cave, now sits on a makeshift throne of storm-smoothed stone. His hands are blistered. His eyes are sunken. But when he speaks, even the clouds pause to listen. Tomorrow, he says, we split their camp. And in that moment, you realize something vital. The Titans might have the past, but the gods, they have momentum. By now, the war has stretched so long that even the stars seem tired of watching. They blink a little slower, and the moon, once bold and round, begins hiding more often behind clouds, like a witness weary of tragedy. You, on the other hand, are still here, eyes wide, feet, dirty dreams full of thunder and ancient grudges. Tonight, you're in a forge, not just any forge, but one buried deep beneath the crust of the world. The Cyclopes are hard at work, their giant single eyes reflecting the molten rivers that snake between anvils the size of houses. You duck as a spark the size of a pigeon whizzes past your nose. This is where the real war is being fought now, not with spears and roars, but with ideas. With weapons unlike anything the Titans ever imagined. The Cyclopes have taken to their craft with a vengeance. One of them, Brontes, is now working on a spear for Athena, yes, Athena. She hasn't even been born yet, but apparently that's not stopping anyone from getting a head start. And while the gods are getting stronger, more disciplined, the Titans, they are adapting too. You sneak a peek into the enemy camp. Yes, you're back to spying. You're getting good at this, and you see the Titans experimenting. Hyperion has begun shaping mirrors of sunlight to blind his enemies. Creus is training lesser monsters as scouts. Even Iapetus, usually the sledgehammer type, is learning to coordinate flanks and rear guards. Historians still argue whether these tactical advances were inspired by early human warfare or the gods themselves evolving. Either way, the Titanomachy has gone from cosmic food fight to actual military campaign. But the gods have a secret advantage: they're underdogs. Scrappy, unpredictable, with just enough chaos in their veins to keep the Titans guessing. And no moment showcases that better than what happens next. You're woken in the middle of the night by a sound like laughter and thunder had a baby. You scramble to your feet, rub the sleep from your eyes, and behold a scene so strange it borders on dreamlike. A Titan fortress, one of their last strongholds, floats into the air. Yes, floats. You squint upward. One of the Hecatonchires is beneath it, hoisting the entire structure with about 70 of his arms, while using the others to lob flaming debris at Titan troops below. It's surreal. It's glorious. It's deeply confusing. Turns out the gods had baited the fortress let it stand, seemingly undefended. When the Titans rushed in, the Hecatonchires sprang the trap. Up went the stronghold. Down went morale. Poseidon added his own flair, of course, flooding the valley surrounding the battlefield and summoning whirlpools to scatter the Titan reinforcements. Somewhere Hera is tallying casualties with frightening precision. And Zeus is no longer just reacting. He's orchestrating. Every gust of wind, every distant rumble of thunder. It all seems to follow his heartbeat now. He's growing into the role he was born for, and everyone around him knows it, even the Titans. You spot Themis Titaness of law and order watching from a crag as her side crumbles. She doesn't look angry. She looks resigned, like someone watching her carefully stacked scrolls get blown off a desk. She doesn't join the fight. Instead, she disappears into the mist. More and more Titans begin to fall back, not in surrender but in retreat. And yet, just when it seems like Olympus is on the verge of total victory, the ground beneath your feet quivers, not trembles. Quivers, as if the world itself has goosebumps. Then you hear it, a growl that doesn't belong to any god or Titan. A sound so deep, it seems to claw at your thoughts from beneath your bones. Typhon. You don't see him yet, but the air has changed. The gods feel it too. Hades stiffens. Hera narrows her eyes. Even Zeus, now steady and commanding, pauses. Because this wasn't part of the plan. Remember Gaia, the Earth Mother. She's been watching all along, torn between the old and new. She birthed the Titans, but the gods are her children too. She wanted peace, balance, but with Cronus fallen and Olympus growing arrogant, she makes a choice, and that choice is Typhon. The wind dies entirely as a shadow rises on the horizon. It's not a shadow cast by something. It is the thing, a storm given limbs, a creature stitched together from smoke magma and the screams of 1,000 storms. You stare upward, neck craned until it aches, as Typhon unfurls his wings. Historians still argue whether Typhon was a late addition to the myth, an afterthought, meant to raise the stakes. But when you see him, that theory feels insulting. He doesn't feel like an afterthought. He feels like a reckoning. Even the Titans back away. Even the Hecatonchires hesitate. And Zeus. He steps forward. He doesn't summon lightning. He doesn't bark orders. He just breathes deep and slow. The storm has arrived. And for the first time in this long, exhausting war, you're not sure the gods can win. You grip the rocky ledge so tightly, your knuckles ache. Because Typhon doesn't walk into battle, he unfolds into it. Imagine a hurricane with hands, a wildfire with lungs, a mountain made of vengeance. That's Typhon. And he doesn't roar. He howls a deep, bone-chilling sound that bends trees backward and makes even the brave whisper. Maybe we sit this one out. The gods freeze. Zeus stands still, shoulders square, but you catch a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but awe, and maybe regret. Typhon surges forward with no warning. One moment, he's a shadow on the horizon. The next, he's in the sky, wings blotting out the stars, serpents writhing from his waist like a pack of angry flaming noodles. Every one of his 100 mouths speaks a different curse, some in words, some in growls. One seems to just chant your name, which is deeply upsetting. You run. You all run. Historians still argue whether Typhon represents the last gasp of chaos, the old world's final resistance before order cemented itself into myth. Others say he was Gaia's punishment for her children's pride. Either way, when Typhon steps onto the battlefield, the war resets. Olympus is no longer advancing. It's retreating. You dart through the trees as flaming rocks rain from the sky. Hera is shielding a group of wounded nymphs beneath a canopy of glowing gold. Demeter is desperately pulling roots from the earth, trying to trip the beast. Hades. Gone. Just gone. You finally spot Zeus, not in the air, not hurling lightning, but collapsed on the slope of a ridge, blood on his brow, breath ragged. Typhon struck first, and fast, knocking him from the sky before he could even react. For a moment, everything holds its breath. Is this it? But then movement. It's Hermes, the trickster, the runner, the messenger no one ever takes seriously until it's too late. He crouches beside Zeus, face pale but eyes gleaming. Time for the plan, he whispers. What plan, you mutter, because this very much feels like the moment where everyone admits they don't have one. Hermes gives you a wink and disappears in a blur. And that's when it begins. The comeback. See, the gods may not have Typhon's brute strength, but they've got something else: coordination. They've learned to trust one another, not completely, not blindly, but enough. And it starts now. Poseidon summons a flood, not to drown Typhon, but to blind him, swirling foam and sea creatures into his dozens of eyes. Hera, with an accuracy that makes you flinch, hurls a bolt of compressed starlight into the beast's open jaw. And from below, out of a crack in the earth, Hades returns, not with an army, but with something far better: the chains of Tartarus. Forged in shadow, soaked in silence, they slither toward Typhon like steel serpents. But it's not enough. Typhon screams, shattering trees and temples alike. He strikes the mountain, sending Zeus tumbling further down the slope. The gods falter. For every step forward, Typhon takes two. He's not a creature. He's a force. And he's winning. You follow Zeus now, crawling down to where he's finally come to rest, broken but breathing. His eyes open as you approach, and for once he doesn't look like a king. He just looks young. I can't win like this, he murmurs. And then a whisper from behind. Yes, you can. It's Gaia. You never expected her to appear, not in full form, not in the open. But here she is, rising from the earth, like a mist that remembers how to speak. She cradles Zeus's head gently. There's no anger in her gaze, no pride, only weariness. I gave birth to him, she says of Typhon, but I didn't raise him. You must finish what you began. She reaches into the soil and pulls forth a single fruit. Glowing, pulsing. Eat this, she says. It holds the fire of the first dawn. Zeus hesitates. Why help me? Because balance, she whispers, is more important than blood. You don't know what that fruit tastes like. It's not for mortals. But as Zeus consumes it, the change is immediate. His wounds seal. His eyes glow not gold, but white, like the first light of creation. When he stands, it's with a grace that silences even Typhon's shrieking storm. And then lightning, not a bolt, a torrent. Zeus doesn't throw one spear, he summons an entire storm front. The sky cracks open and down pours fury. Each bolt is a judgment. Each strike a line in a divine sentence no one dares interrupt. Typhon stumbles. Poseidon pushes the sea higher. Hades binds the ankles. Hermes distracts him with dazzling speed. And Zeus lifts both arms and calls upon every bit of sky that's ever existed. The final bolt crashes down like a god's exhale, and Typhon falls, not dead. Gods and monsters rarely die, but sealed, bound beneath the crust of the earth deep under Mount Etna, where his writhing still causes tremors in Sicily today. You stand there, hair singed, heart racing. The war is over. Not with a cheer, but a breathless silence. It doesn't feel like victory at first. After all that thunder, the world goes oddly still, like nature itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if Typhon will rise again. But he doesn't. The mountain doesn't crack open. The sky doesn't bleed. The silence holds. You stand beside Zeus as he lowers his arms, shoulders slack with exhaustion. He doesn't collapse this time. He just sits cross-legged on the blackened earth, like a student waiting for the teacher to speak. But there is no teacher left, just wine dust and the muffled sounds of gods slowly realizing it's over. Or almost. The Titans are still out there. Not all of them, though. Some have vanished, blown into dust, dissolved into rivers. Or, in the case of Oceanus, simply wandered off mid-war and never came back. Legend says he took his retirement seriously and became the distant sea. That's one way to quit your job. The remaining Titans, however, are scattered, leaderless, and deeply annoyed. You'd think they might surrender outright, but surrender isn't really in their job description. So the gods do something unexpected. They pause. For the first time in 10 divine years, though, it feels like centuries they stop fighting. No ambushes, no raids, just quiet. Poseidon builds a sea fortress to rest. Demeter regrows a meadow. Hera composes a list of insults she still intends to deliver to every Titan personally. And Zeus walks the perimeter of the known world. Literally. You follow him through forests still smoldering from lightning strikes, across plains flattened by Titan fists. He steps carefully, respectfully, acknowledging each scar the war has left. Occasionally, he kneels, plants a seed, and murmurs something under his breath. I want them to grow knowing peace, he says. Who, you ask? Mankind, he answers. The ones who will come after us. You blink, because mankind hasn't exactly been invented yet. But Zeus, he's thinking ahead, already imagining what a world without Titans might look like. And you realize for the first time that he's not just trying to win, he's trying to build something lasting. Historians still debate whether this period, the lull after Typhon, but before the final imprisonment, was an actual ceasefire or just a logistical slowdown. But in that pause, the gods do more than rest. They redefine themselves. Hades returns to the edge of Tartarus and begins drawing up plans not for weapons, but for organization. He carves out realms, writes names on stone walls. Not all souls are the same, he argues. Some deserve peace, others need penance. You watch him create the first blueprints for the underworld, equal parts labyrinth and sanctuary. Meanwhile, Poseidon reshapes the coastlines, carving out harbors where none existed before. He doesn't just tame the sea, he collaborates with it, striking pacts with sea nymphs and ancient currents. One fish even salutes him, or maybe that's the sleep deprivation talking. And Zeus, now fully healed, finally calls a summit. You're there because, of course, you are standing just behind a marble column pretending to dust something. The gods gather at the peak of Mount Olympus, which up until now was mostly used for dramatic monologues and lightning hurling. But tonight it becomes sacred. Zeus addresses his siblings first. We've won nothing. He says, voice steady, not yet. Hera raises an eyebrow. You flatten Typhon. Demeter nods, and Cronus is gone. But they're not finished, Zeus says. The Titans still roam. Some want revenge, some want return. We need to end this. That's when the real decision takes shape, the final confrontation. Not another war, not a drawn-out campaign. A decisive, coordinated sweep. A capture, a sentencing. And not out of hatred, but necessity. So the gods rise one last time. Not with fury, but resolve. And this time they win quickly. The Titans, scattered and divided, fall one by one. Some surrender with dignity. Others fight until the very end. You witness the defeat of Hyperion, his blazing form cooling like dying coals. You see Krios tricked into a mirror maze by Hermes. You even watch Atlas, strong bitter Atlas, fall not in battle but by being outlasted. And then the question comes, what do we do with them? This is no small decision. These aren't petty criminals. These are cosmic forces older than the sky, capable of unraveling creation, if allowed to fester. So Zeus proposes Tartarus, the deepest pit of the earth. A prison, yes, but not just for punishment. for containment, for balance. And here something remarkable happens. The gods debate. No lightning, no tridents, just voices. Hestia argues for mercy. Hera demands order. Hades surprisingly suggests they offer the Titans a chance to choose exile instead of chains. But Zeus knows one truth none of them say aloud. If even one of them escapes again, he says softly, we will not survive it. And so the vote is cast. You descend into Tartarus once more, not as a prisoner, not as a spy, but as a witness. The Titans are led down in solemn procession, each bound by chains forged in the oldest fires. The Hecatonchires, now free and loyal, guard the gates. Atlas receives a special sentence to hold up the sky itself, preventing heaven and earth from ever colliding again. And with that, the war ends. Not with cheers, not with songs, but with silence. A silence that feels final. The dust hasn't even settled when the weight of victory begins to press in. You sit on a ledge halfway up Mount Olympus' toes, dangling over a drop so high it hums. Around you, the gods are quiet. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of realization. They've won. The Titans are sealed. The storm has passed. But now comes the hard part. It's easy to swing a sword. It's much harder to decide what happens after the sword is sheathed. Zeus is the first to break the hush. He calls a gathering one without weapons war chants or battlefield maps. Just the gods, sitting in a loose circle surrounded by the gentle breath of wind and the golden light of a sun, no longer hidden by storm clouds. You're nearby, of course, probably balancing a tray of ambrosia you definitely weren't invited to carry. But no one stops you. They're too deep in thought. We need to divide the world, Zeus says. Hera crosses her arms. Into what realms? Zeus replies. So we don't become the Titans we just buried. That catches everyone's attention. Because deep down, every one of them knows unchecked power corrupts, even when it comes with thunderbolts and glowy eyes. So the first great division begins. The three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, stand on a stone platform worn smooth by years of wind. They cast lots. Not dice, not bones. Divine lots etched with runes older than memory. Zeus draws the sky, Poseidon draws the sea, and Hades, he draws the underworld. There's no argument, no dramatic slow-motion reaction shot. Just a long pause as each one nods, recognizing the strange rightness of it. Zeus looks up and smiles. Then I'll keep the clouds in check. Poseidon grunts. I'll calm the waves. Sometimes. And Hades. He simply turns cloak swirling like shadow smoke and walks into the earth without a word. You feel a shift, subtle but profound. This isn't just administration, it's order. The first threads of structure in a world that's only ever known chaos and revenge. Historians still debate whether this division of realms myth was a metaphor for establishing the natural elements, air, water, and death, as fundamental building blocks of the Greek worldview. But from your view perched in the breeze, it feels far more personal. These are siblings drawing boundaries. Finally. Afterward, Zeus proposes the next step. We need thrones, he says. Hera raises a brow. Plural, plural, he repeats. No one rules alone. It's a radical idea, especially in a pantheon where ego could knock over a mountain. But Zeus insists a shared rule, at least in principle. A council, a structure, a throne room where disputes could be aired before someone hurls a lightning bolt. And so Mount Olympus becomes more than a rock. It becomes a seat of power. Temples begin to appear, crafted not just by gods, but by nymphs, dryads, and spirits called into being from the leftover magic of war. Statues are carved. Altars rise. And yes, thrones are built 12 eventually, though some are still waiting for their rightful occupants. You stroll through the nascent halls of Olympus now, where the floors shine with starlight, and each breeze carries the scent of newness. There's laughter here, and music, and of course the occasional loud argument about whose job it is to manage thunderstorms over Thessaly. But one thing is clear, the gods are settling in, and humans, they're stirring. You peer over the edge of the world and spot them small curious creatures huddled around fire, learning to shape stone and speak in full sentences. They don't know it yet, but they are being watched, protected, occasionally laughed at, and very soon interfered with. Zeus gazes down at them often. They'll need guidance, he says. They'll need freedom, says Prometheus, appearing once more at the edge of the summit. Now Prometheus is complicated. The gods owe him, but they also don't trust him. He talks too much about fairness, too much about giving mortals power. You remember what he did during the war, defecting from the Titans, supplying intel, whispering ideas about fire and future cities? And now he wants to give humans fire, not just literal flame, but knowledge, technology, craft, civilization. Zeus hesitates. He sees promise in mankind, but also danger. The Titans fell because of pride. What's to stop these fragile blink and you'll miss 'em creatures from making the same mistake? But Prometheus doesn't wait for approval. One night he slips down to earth, carries a glowing ember in a hollow fennel stalk, and places it gently in human hands. They stare at it. Then they cheer. You watch the first fire dance on human faces reflected in their wide eyes as warmth begins to spread across the cold plains of the world. They cook, they forge, they dream, and Zeus. He knows the balance has just shifted again. You've started something, he tells Prometheus coldly. Prometheus just smiles. It was already beginning. I just gave it a spark. You wake to the smell of smoke, not the terrifying sky is falling kind, but something gentler. Familiar. Cooked meat, maybe. Roasting grains. You peek over a cloud which you've learned are surprisingly soft if you lie very still and see humans dancing around their fires. Their tools are crude, but their joy is pure. Their shadows leap with the flames. Prometheus's gift is changing everything. And Zeus. He watches from above, arms folded, jaw tight. He doesn't speak for a long while. Not to you. Not to anyone. But you can tell he's thinking. Because gods don't just act out of whim or boredom. Not anymore. They weigh things. And the scales are beginning to tilt. Zeus calls a private council, one that doesn't include Prometheus. You're behind a pillar again, pretending to sweep non-existent dust. It's a skill you've perfected. In front of him sit Hera, Poseidon, Athena, just born yet already wiser than most, and Hephaestus, the forge god, whose hands always smell like iron and fire. He's gone too far, Zeus says. Hera nods. He means well, but he's reckless. Athena speaks softly. Mortals should grow at their own pace. Hephaestus shrugs. He stole my best spark. They all agree Prometheus has crossed a line. Historians still argue whether this moment reflects early Greek anxieties about the limits of human innovation, about fire metalwork, even hubris. But from where you stand, it feels more personal. It's not just about fire. It's about who gets to decide. Zeus doesn't send an army. He sends silence. Prometheus is summoned. He arrives without fear. I gave them fire, he says, because they needed it. You gave them fire, Zeus replies, because you wanted to be their god. That lands like a thunderclap. Prometheus flinches, but only slightly. They won't worship me, he says. They'll thank me. And then they'll forget me. Which, ironically, is exactly what gods fear most. Zeus sighs, tired of the conversation before it even began. There must be consequences. And so Prometheus is chained not out of hatred, but out of principle. To remind gods and mortals alike, power must come with boundaries. You follow them to the farthest edge of the world, where cliffs drop into cloud, and nothing echoes but the sound of wind asking questions. Prometheus is bound to a rock, his wrists glowing with divine rope. He does not scream. He does not beg. But his eyes, those eyes never stop watching the world below. And then comes the eagle. Every day it tears at him, and every night he heals. An endless loop of pain and renewal, written not just as punishment, but as warning. Still the fire remains with mankind. They don't give it back. And soon they begin building. Villages become towns. Words become stories. Prayers rise into the sky like smoke signals, some for Demeter asking for harvest, others for Poseidon begging calm seas, and many for Zeus, who has become the name people shout when lightning strikes too close to the barn. But the gods are not unanimous in this new order. Hades rarely visits Olympus now. He's busy shaping the underworld into something complex and strangely beautiful. Fields of asphodel, rivers with memories, judges with stone faces who weigh souls not with scales, but with silence. Poseidon returns to his seas, grumbling about boat traffic and coastal erosion. Hera turns her attention to marriage and birthrights, deeply invested in who loves whom and how loyally they do it. There's gossip, of course. The myths that will one day reach your school textbooks are already forming behind celestial curtains. Meanwhile, mortals continue their climb. They sculpt idols, compose hymns, build temples. They fight too. You see the first little wars, the first lies, the first thefts. Zeus frowns. Is this what they'll become? He asks aloud, mostly to himself. They're flawed, Athena replies. Like us. And that is the first time you hear a god admit it. The first time anyone says what you've quietly suspected since this whole thing began. The gods are not perfect. They're powerful, immortal, majestic, but not perfect, and yet they are responsible. Zeus begins visiting Earth more often, not to punish, but to observe. Sometimes he even walks among mortals disguised as an old man or a wandering bard. He listens. He learns their fears, their hopes, their jokes. He begins to understand them. And one day, as you sit beside him on a low hill outside a human village, watching smoke curl into the sky, he says something strange. They pray to me, he mutters. But they don't know me. You nudge him? Then let them. And maybe that's when it begins, the idea of myths with meaning. Not just stories of who fought whom, but stories that explain thunder and heartbreak, and why sometimes even gods get lonely. Because something has changed since the end of the Titanomachy. The gods have stopped fighting for survival. Now they must fight for purpose. By now, Olympus has settled into a kind of divine rhythm. The mountain breathes stories. Its halls echo with laughter, argument, prophecy, and the occasional poorly aimed lightning bolt. But beneath all the grandeur, something lingers, a feeling. A quiet hum in the air, like a string pulled taut but not yet plucked. You feel it especially in Zeus. He walks more often now. Not in glory, not in pomp, but in thought. You trail behind him sometimes through fog-choked forests, sometimes along craggy coastlines where the sea sighs against rock like it misses something. He doesn't speak much on these walks. He just watches. Mortals are growing. They're building cities, naming stars, inventing currencies, blaming things on Mercury retrograde. They offer sacrifices. Sometimes goats, sometimes prayers, sometimes just worry. And the gods listen. Sometimes. But the truth is, they're learning too. You find Hestia one day tending a hearth, not in Olympus, but in a mortal village. Her flames flicker low, comforting. She smiles gently and says, "It's easier to keep watch from here." And that's the shift, isn't it? The gods are no longer just above. They're among. But with presence comes risk. Mortal love turns quickly to expectation, then dependency, then fear. And somewhere deep in the whispering forests of the world, mortals begin telling new stories. Not just about gods who create and protect, but gods who punish, who fall in love, who rage, who betray, and the gods? Listen. You hear Aphrodite grumble. I was never in that love triangle. You see Ares storming around because someone carved his statue with a tiny spear. Even Dionysus is confused that mortals think he invented hangovers. Historians still argue if this stage of mythology gods becoming flawed, messy, emotional is a human projection or a divine adaptation. But to you, it feels like a mirror. Mortals are shaping the gods as much as the gods shaped them. And Zeus. He senses the danger, not war, not rebellion, but misunderstanding. So he does something unexpected. He calls a council. Not the usual high and mighty Olympus one, but a more humble gathering. He invites Hestia, Athena, even Demeter, who normally avoids meetings unless crops are involved. And there, in a sun-dappled grove, he lays out his plan. We need to remind them he says what we stand for, not just what we can do. It's a strange meeting. There's no formal vote, no flashy declarations, just soft nods, long gazes, and a collective exhale. It's a moment of unity, not born from fear, but from intent. And so the first divine roles are chosen. Athena takes wisdom and strategy. Apollo takes music prophecy and the complicated business of poetry. Artemis claims the hunt and the wild things. Ares predictably grabs war. Hephaestus chooses the forge. Hera marriage. Demeter the harvest. Hestia keeps the flame. Hermes, bless him, volunteers for messages, roads, and mischief in that order. Even Dionysus, late to arrive, and slightly tipsy, shrugs and says, wine and theater, I guess. These aren't just job titles, they're symbols. Ways for mortals to understand divine forces. A language between realms. Zeus doesn't assign himself anything, at least not at first. You ask him about it one night as he watches clouds drift across the stars like lazy sheep. I already have enough titles, he mutters. But maybe I'll just keep the sky. And responsibility. Which honestly suits him. But of course, not all gods love labels. Hades doesn't attend the council. He's busy creating boundaries, actual ones, rivers of forgetting, doors that only open once, judges who weigh souls with glances. He's not cruel, just firm. And for mortals, he offers something surprisingly comforting: structure. A promise that death isn't chaos, it's process. Still whispers travel. Some mortals fear him. Others worship him quietly in caves and shadows, offering coins and stories. Hades doesn't complain. He prefers the honest ones who know how to keep a promise. And then, the monsters return. No, not the Titans, not Typhon, something else. Small things, greedy kings, jealous siblings, mortal cruelty. You watch dismayed as cities rise only to crumble under pride, as wars begin over statues, as offerings become bribes, as faith curdles into politics. And Zeus. He begins to crack, just a little, not visibly, not with fury, but with weariness. He starts dreaming again of storms he can't control, of voices he can't understand, of mortals who cry his name but don't mean it. He visits Prometheus, still bound. Still silent, the eagle circling overhead like a bureaucrat on lunch break. They are ungrateful. Zeus mutters. Prometheus opens one eye. So were you. There's a long pause. Then Zeus asks the one question he's never dared say aloud. Did we make a mistake? Prometheus doesn't answer right away. Instead, he turns his gaze to the horizon, where a child builds a temple out of clay and prayer. Finally, he says, You didn't make them, Zeus. You just gave them a chance. And that, perhaps, is the truth Zeus needed to hear. Because maybe the gods weren't meant to be rulers. Maybe they were meant to be witnesses. It's a quiet morning on Olympus. A strange, rare calm hangs in the air like dew on marble. You're sitting at the edge of a balcony overlooking the mortal world, legs swinging idly, watching tiny plumes of smoke rise from chimneys. Far below, a flock of birds drifts through a valley. From this height, it all looks manageable, peaceful, maybe even perfect. But behind you, the gods are murmuring. Whispers drift from one corridor to the next. Something is changing. Not cataclysm, not war, but a shift deep and slow like tectonic plates grinding just beneath your sandals. It starts with the humans. Of course it does. They've stopped praying quite so often. Not entirely, but there are fewer sacrifices, fewer hymns. The statues still shine, but they gather a bit more dust. You visit a temple one afternoon and find it empty, except for a dog napping in the shade and a cracked offering bowl half full of grain. Mortals are distracted. They've discovered new things, new forms of power, tools, trade, leadership. They build cities now so tall the wind forgets how to pass through them. They consult stars for fate and argue about laws and taxes instead of omens and oracles. It doesn't go unnoticed. Hera frowns as she gazes into her sacred scrying pool. They're forgetting who gave them harvest, she says, eyes narrowed. Demeter sighs. They're too busy measuring it now. Ares scowls. They still fight. They just pretend it's about territory. Even Apollo, golden and usually unbothered, finds his temples quieter, the songs shorter. Athena, however, isn't worried. They're growing, she says simply. It's what we wanted. But is it? You walk with Zeus through a field of new clouds, soft as sheep's wool, and he doesn't say much at first. Then, out of nowhere, he asks, if they stop believing in us, do we stop existing? You stop heart fluttering. I don't know, you whisper. Historians still argue whether the Greek gods were ever believed in the way later deities were, whether the ancients truly thought Zeus hurled thunder, or if it was more symbolic. But that misses the point. Belief isn't about fact, it's about connection. And connection is fading? Zeus feels it. So does Hermes, who finds fewer messages to deliver. So does Hephaestus, whose forge dims without mortal requests. So does Aphrodite, whose name is whispered less in longing and more in metaphor. So the gods gather once again, not for war, not for punishment, but for discussion. It's surprisingly civil. A kind of divine town hall held in a grove that smells of cypress and burnt honey. We need to adapt, Athena suggests. Or remind them, says Hera. Or let them go, murmurs Hestia. That one lands like a dropped goblet. Let them go, the very idea feels treasonous. These mortals, they were shaped by divine hands, carried through chaos, guarded through war. To release them now feels like throwing a child into a forest with a pat on the head and a good luck. But maybe it's time. After all, freedom was always the point. You sit beside Demeter as she watches a farmer harvest wheat. He doesn't pray, doesn't chant. He just works, wiping his brow, humming a tune passed down from someone who used to believe. He still honors me, she says quietly. He just doesn't know it. And there it is, the heart of the matter. Mortals have changed. But maybe that doesn't mean the gods are gone. Maybe they've just moved. From statues to stories, from altars to metaphors, from loud thunderclaps to quiet instincts. You wander through the mortal world, now unnoticed. And yet, familiar symbols keep appearing. A trident carved into a ship's prow, an owl perched over a courtroom, lightning bolts etched into a shield. Hades' name whispered during funerals with both fear and reverence. They remember, just differently. And perhaps that's enough. Back on Olympus, the gods come to a decision not by vote, not by speech, but by a kind of collective breath. They will step back, not abandon, not vanish, just loosen their grip. Let mortals lead. Let them stumble. Let them choose. Zeus watches the horizon one last time before he retreats to his cloud-crowned throne. If they ever need us, he says they'll find us. In storms, in stories, in the quiet between questions. You look to the sky expecting it to feel empty, but it doesn't. It feels open. Which is better? Because now the world belongs to both mortals and myths. The wind feels different now. Not colder, not stronger, just older. As if it remembers something you've only just begun to forget. You sit with your back against a sun-warmed column on Olympus watching golden leaves fall from a tree that shouldn't even have seasons. Autumn, it seems, has reached even the gods. Below the mortal world thrums with energy. People rush through cities without looking up. They make deals, write poems, wage wars, bake bread, bury loved ones. They live, and they do it mostly without the gods. And yet Olympus still stands, not silent, not abandoned, just quieter. The thrones are still there, polished, powerful, but often empty. Sometimes Athena sits in hers, head bowed, sketching battle formations on her knee. Sometimes Artemis wanders through the halls with a wolf at her heels, eyes scanning the sky as if waiting for a new constellation. But more often than not, they are simply gone. Out in the world, watching, wandering. You find Hera one afternoon in a mortal town disguised as an old woman with a shawl and a sharp tongue. She's helping two young lovers who've quarreled over something dumb, who said what, who forgot what, who meant what. Hera listens, interrupts, fixes things with just a few pointed words and a handful of pomegranate seeds. They never know who she was, but they stop arguing. And somewhere in a nearby temple, a candle flickers back to life. You realize then that belief doesn't always come in hymns. Sometimes it arrives in kindness, in instinct, in wonder. Historians still debate whether the gods ever truly left. Some argue that they faded into memory, that they became allegory. But in these quiet corners, you see a different truth. They just changed roles. You pass Hermes on a crossroads at dusk. He tips his cap and offers you a coin. Still running messages, you ask? He grins. Always. Just fewer prayers these days, more dreams. He tosses the coin in the air and it vanishes. The dreams he speaks of are vivid now, more symbolic, more strange. Mortals dream of chariots made of stars, of golden eagles, of women who speak in riddles while pouring wine. They wake confused, inspired. They write things down. They start cults. They abandon them. The cycle spins. Back on Olympus, Hephaestus works alone. His forge is quieter, his hammer slower, but he keeps building not weapons, not palaces, stories. He carves them into stone panels that hang along the mountain's edge, etched in myth, shaped in memory. You read one depicting the first lightning bolt ever forged, and another showing Zeus laughing with a mortal child beneath a fig tree. You sit there for hours reading stories that will one day become the dusty, debated stuff of ancient textbooks. But here, they're real, warm with intention, heavy with care. And then one evening, something unexpected happens. A storm begins to gather, but it's not Zeus's doing. The clouds don't swirl, they tremble. And from deep within the earth, beneath mountains, under oceans, something stirs. At first, no one wants to believe it. The gods, after all, sealed the Titans, defeated Typhon, bound chaos beneath law. But the tremors don't stop. You follow Poseidon to a cliffside temple. His eyes scan the horizon as waves crash harder than they should, not in anger, but in alarm. This isn't natural, he says. Something's remembering. Remembering he doesn't explain. Neither does Hades, who appears from the mist, without a sound cloak trailing smoke, eyes narrowed. They were never gone, he says, only dreaming. For the first time in an age, the gods regroup not in panic, but in preparation. Because something is pushing back, not the Titans, not Typhon, something deeper. Memory. You see it in the mortals first. A child in Thebes wakes screaming about a golden figure in the sea. A woman in Crete writes poetry in a dead language she's never learned. A blind man on the edge of Asia Minor dreams of Kronos' face and sings it in hexameter before dying. It spreads like a breeze through the world, the old names, The ancient fears. Something is waking. Zeus stands again on Olympus, not in despair, but in thought. We built this, he says. Athena nods. And now they remember it. You realize then that the stories never left. They were simply buried. Beneath logic, beneath cities, beneath time. But memory is patient, and stories they dig. The gods don't panic. They prepare. Not with thunder, not with war cries, but with stories of their own. They begin to tell them again, not as rulers, not as distant figures, but as witnesses, as voices in the dark, as whispers in the wind. Because what rises now isn't enemy, it's legacy, and legacy can't be chained. It begins with a whisper in the stones, not from the gods, not from the wind, but from the bones of the world itself, ancient echoes from the time before time crawling back toward consciousness. You feel it in the marble beneath your feet as you wander Olympus. It hums faintly like a forgotten melody surfacing in the back of your mind. You follow it, down old stairwells, past shrines that haven't seen offerings in years, into the chambers where the first myths were carved not to be read, but to be remembered. They're etched in firelight and shadow. You find something strange, a mural. Not finished? Not yet. It shows the Titanomachy. You know that scene well. Cronus falling, Zeus rising, thunder, chains, glory. But at the edge of the panel, someone has begun to carve something new, a spiral looping endlessly. And within it, mortals. You trace the spiral with your finger and realize this isn't a timeline. It's a pattern. And it's starting again. The gods see it too. Not all at once, but slowly. Like dew collecting into a drop. They gather again, not for war, not even for discussion. Just to watch, to feel. The world is remembering, but memory is a tricky thing. In mortal towns, strange things begin to happen. Statues blink. Rivers whisper names. Children speak of golden apples and silver dogs with knowing smiles. Old songs return on the lips of shepherds. Temples long buried rise in dreams, and then somehow in reality. You sit with Athena at the edge of a mortal city, Athens, though it hasn't yet earned that name. She's watching a group of boys playing with sticks, reenacting the story of Heracles. Do they get the details right? You ask. She chuckles. Almost none. But they believe it? She nods. With all their hearts. You realize then that belief doesn't need accuracy. It needs need. Mortals crave connection, wonder, meaning. Even if the stories shift, the shape remains. And that shape is returning. Poseidon comes ashore more often now. The sea is restless, full of omens. He doesn't speak them aloud, but you see it in his eyes. He's expecting a storm that hasn't been named yet. Hades rises more frequently from the underworld, his shadow long and thoughtful. The dead are dreaming again, he says, and some of them remember too much. Zeus begins pacing, not angrily, not impatiently, but like someone trying to decide whether to speak or to wait. He doesn't fear a new war. He fears a new mistake, because this time it won't be the Titans rising or Typhon. It'll be the stories themselves, and the power mortals give them shaped not by divine will, but by human hands. Prometheus, still bound, hears it all. You visit him because how could you not, and find him smiling again. You look pleased, you say. They're remembering, he replies. That's always the first step. Toward what? Toward asking better questions. You sit beside him for a while, letting the wind whip your hair. The eagle circles overhead, as it always does. But Prometheus doesn't even flinch. He's watching the horizon. They're starting to dream about Olympus again, he says. Not just in temples, in paintings, in philosophy. You nod, and that's dangerous. Oh, very, but also promising. Because when mortals reimagine gods, they reshape reality. Not in the thunderbolt sense, though, there's still some of that, but in the way people treat each other, the way they govern, the way they write laws and carve ideals into stone. The gods become symbols. Symbols become movements. Movements become nations. And symbols have power. Zeus holds a gathering. Not a council this time. Not a family dinner. Something stranger. He calls it a listening. No speeches, just stories. He invites the muses who arrive barefoot and singing. He invites old spirits, Nyx Hemera, who don't care much for rules, but bring ancient wisdom. And he invites mortals too, though they don't know it. They dream of Olympus that night and whisper truths in their sleep. You sit in the back next to Hermes, who's taking notes on the inside of his arm with a bronze stylus. And you listen. You listen to stories of mortal courage, of broken kings and clever queens, of children who tamed monsters, of farmers who tricked fate, and in each story, a flicker of the gods, not always accurate, not always flattering, but alive. You glance at Zeus. He smiles faintly. Because now it's not about worship, it's about presence. And in that presence, there is hope. That mortals will not repeat the mistakes of titans. That gods will not repeat the mistakes of kings. That stories, if told well, can hold the world together. Even if they forget your name, it's dawn again, but different this time. The light doesn't creep, it arrives, bold and golden, spilling across Olympus like it owns the place. You watch it stretch long fingers across the marble halls, turning stone to honey and mist to velvet. Somewhere birds you can't name are already singing off-key joyfully, like they forgot about the silence that once ruled here. And beneath it all, the gods waking. Not from sleep, not really. Gods don't sleep, but from stillness. Hera steps barefoot through a garden overgrown with ivy and roses, her fingertips brushing petals like she's reacquainting herself with softness. Apollo strums a lyre beneath a fig tree, the strings humming songs older than cities. Hestia hums as she stirs a pot over a small flame, smiling faintly, as if something funny just occurred to her. They've all changed, grown quieter, not weaker, deeper. You walk with Zeus again, this time through a corridor where every pillar tells a story in carved relief. Some you recognize, others haven't happened yet. And at the end of it, a new one blank. Waiting. He touches it lightly. Do you think they'll keep telling our stories, he asks. You tilt your head. They already are. But not the way we live them. Does that matter? He thinks for a long moment. No, he says at last. Maybe it's better this way? And then he laughs, not a roar, not a proclamation, just a real open laugh. Imagine if they knew how many times I almost gave up. Oh, they'll write songs where you never doubted anything. He rolls his eyes. Typical. You find Athena later walking through a mortal city. It's cleaner than most. Marble columns, public forums, schools. Statues of her stand tall in every square, but she pays them no mind. She stops to listen to a group of students debating. Loud, confident. Wrong in places, brilliant in others. She smiles. This, she says, is legacy, not temples, not offerings. Thought. Mortals have stopped waiting for gods to fix things. They've started asking why things are broken and how to rebuild them better. And yes, sometimes they get it wrong, spectacularly wrong. But sometimes they ask the right question at the right time and everything shifts. Down in the underworld, Hades is busy in his own way. He's added new wings to his domain, not punishments, not even rewards, just places for memories, for people who mattered in small, unsung ways, the ones no bards ever wrote about. A woman who sang lullabies, a boy who always helped carry firewood, a healer who never asked for thanks. They were faithful in silence, he says. You remember them, you ask. I always do, he says. And you believe him. Because the gods are no longer thunder and fear. They are echoes, not fading, but flowing. Through action, through stories, through meaning. One day you follow Hermes down to the shoreline of the mortal world, where a young man is carving a poem into a wax tablet. He pauses every few words, muttering to himself, unsure, frustrated. Hermes leans down and whispers in his ear. The man smiles and keeps writing. He never sees Hermes, but the poem survives. And you realize the gods haven't disappeared. They've simply moved closer, into inspiration, into coincidence, into the space between a question and an answer. That evening the gods gather one more time. No summit, no thunder, just a meal. Bread, wine, olives, honey. Firelight flickering across their faces as they share laughter and half-finished thoughts. No throne at the head of the table, no grand speeches. Zeus raises a cup. To memory, he says. They all echo it. And you sit beside them now, not above, not below, just with. You've witnessed everything. The beginning, the fall, the storm, the silence, and now, the spiral. The stories will continue, told around fires, etched into ruins, mistranslated, rewritten, beloved. Because this was never about gods and monsters. It was about us, trying to understand ourselves in the mirror of myths, and in that reflection finding hope. The moon rises over Olympus, soft and low, casting silver ripples across the polished stone. You walk slowly through the halls, bare feet echoing softly in the cool quiet. The gods are still, not vanished, just resting, each in their own way. Hera's garden glows with moonflowers. Ares leans on his spear, gazing out over sleeping cities. Dionysus lounges beneath grapevines, wine-untouched eyes half-lidded with a rare kind of peace. And Zeus. He sits on the highest balcony, not in his throne, but on a simple bench, elbows on his knees, head tilted upward. You sit beside him without a word. For a long while, neither of you speaks. Then they're going to forget, he says. Maybe for a while you reply. But eventually, you look out over the mortal world fields, rippling in the night wind, fires flickering in hearths, songs rising gently from open windows. They'll remember you whisper. Maybe not names, but the meaning, the feeling, the pattern. Always. He nods. Then we've done what we needed to. It's a strange kind of ending, isn't it? No final battle, no grand reward, just a slow quieting. The feeling you get when a festival ends and the lanterns burn low and the laughter drifts off into memory. But there's comfort in that. You wander past the library where Athena has left a scroll open, mid-sentence something about philosophy and ducks. Down through the forge where Hephaestus has left a small glowing orb, cooling on an anvil. Through the stables where Artemis's deer stir in their sleep. And finally to the gates. You stand there looking outward, as if waiting for someone or something to arrive. And maybe something will. Because the world always circles back. Mortals will lose their way. Then find it. Then lose it again. But the stories, they'll stay. They'll curl around campfires in bedtime whispers, in marble inscriptions, and awkward school essays. They'll show up in metaphors and tattoos and dreams. And sometimes, just sometimes, a thunderstorm will roll in unexpectedly, and someone will smile and say, "Sounds like Zeus is grumpy again." The gods won't answer not directly, but the rain will fall anyway. And in that rain, something ancient will stir, because they never left. Not really. They just became part of the world they once ruled. You walk the edge of Olympus one last time. The stars are sharp and clear tonight. You recognize constellations Orion, Cassiopeia, the Great Bear, and you wonder how many were born from whispered prayers, from grief, from stories someone refused to let die. You wonder if one day someone will look up and name a new one. After you awaken to birdsong, not the regal cry of an eagle, nor the warlike shriek of Ares's hawks, but something small and ordinary. A sparrow maybe. You're on a hillside now, not Olympus exactly, but close enough to feel the pull of it. The world below is stirring. Fields green with spring, markets warming to the noise of barter, laughter from open doors, a child's voice calling for their dog. You sit up and watch. Something shifted again. Not with drama, not with thunder, just a subtle turning, like a key clicking softly in an ancient lock. The divine no longer rules from the mountaintop. It ripples through custom, through culture, through stories passed from one warm hand to another. You find Hestia kneeling beside a mortal hearth, gently stoking the coals with a branch of olive wood. No one notices her, but the room warms anyway. The bread bakes evenly. The child crying in the corner falls asleep. That's the new Olympus, not above. Within, Zeus appears beside you in a blink. He does that sometimes, now arriving without grandeur. Just a man in a dark cloak, eyes older than language. They're going to outgrow us, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Are you sure he considers it? They'll make gods in their own image. They already are. You nod, and maybe that's the point. He smiles a real one, not the tight grin of a war leader, but something softer, something earned. You walk together down into a small village where a new temple is being built, not for Zeus, not for Hera, not for any one god. It's for all of them. The stones are imperfect. The roof will leak, but the intent, it glows. Inside, a mortal priest, barefoot, wrinkled, joyful, recites stories to a circle of children. Some tales are familiar, others wildly inaccurate. But the children listen with wide eyes, and one of them gasps when the thunder god appears. Another clutches her friend's arm when the titan falls. They believe, even if they don't know they do. You and Zeus stand in the doorway watching. The priest never looks up, but as he ends the story, he says, "And that is why we must never forget what power truly is, not the kind that conquers, but the kind that remembers." Outside, Demeter blesses a crop with a gentle touch to the soil. No one sees. No one thanks her. But the harvest will be kind this year. Apollo walks through a music school, trailing his fingers across the strings of lutes. One boy pauses and rewrites the end of his song. Artemis guides a hunter's arrow ever so slightly, not to strike, but to spare. Ares. He watches from afar, not pleased, not angry, just quiet. Because even he knows this is not his age, not anymore. And you? You realize something strange. You don't want it to go back, not to the war, not to the old thrones, not even to the height of Olympus. You want this world of imperfect prayers and scattered myths and flickering belief, because it's honest, because it grows, because somewhere in a dusty corner of a forgotten shrine, a child still lights a candle and says, "I don't know who you are, but please help." And someone always hears. You return to the mountain one last time. Zeus sits quietly watching the clouds roll in. No thunder, no lightning, just a soft grumble like a sky stretching its limbs. Do you think they'll forget the war, you ask? He nods. They should. But it mattered. It did, he says. But what comes after matters more. The mural on the wall, the one you saw before, is changing. The spiral grows. New stories etched in at the edges. Some divine, some mortal, some hard to tell apart. You touch the stone. It's warm. You add one final mark. Not a name, just a shape, a circle, the end of the spiral, and the beginning of the next. Evening comes gently. It doesn't fall. It settles, like an old friend easing into a familiar chair. The skies over Olympus fade to lavender, the clouds glowing faintly like candle smoke caught in amber. You sit once more at the edge of the world, feet dangling into the sky, watching the stars prepare to speak their ancient names. It is quiet now. Not the empty silence of loss, but the full golden hush of something complete. Below, the mortal world glimmers. Torches in the streets, lamps in windows, 1,000 tiny suns blooming where once there was only fire stolen in secret. You see temples and towers, farms and theaters, markets and graves, all of it built from dust and hope. You don't need to ask if the gods are watching. They are, but not with suspicion, not with pride, just with peace. Because this is the age after, and in the age after, the gods are not rulers. They are reminders. You find them not on thrones, but in gestures, a hand resting on a shoulder before battle, a flash of insight at the edge of sleep, a coin dropped at a crossroads with no one to see it but the sky. You hear Hera in vows whispered in the dark. You see Athena in the quiet confidence of a student about to speak up. You smell Demeter in warm bread baked for a neighbor. You feel Hestia in the moment someone chooses kindness instead of cleverness. And Zeus. You see him in the pause before the storm, the breath before the choice, the sky before the leap. It's not grandeur anymore. It's grace. The gods no longer stand above the world. They stand with it. And you, curious little mortal patient dreamer, quiet witness, have walked with them through it all. Through the raw birth of chaos, through war and thunder, through betrayal and prophecy and patience. You've watched them grow. You've watched us grow. And now, as stars scatter like seeds, and the air cools with sleep, you lie back against the stone and close your eyes. The story isn't ending. It's resting. Waiting to be told again in another voice by another fire. Because myths never die. They echo. And tonight, their echo is gentle. Their breath is soft. Their heartbeat hums through marble and ash, through soil and skin, through ink and air. You've earned your sleep now. So lie still. Let the wind pull the weight from your limbs. Let the stars cradle your thoughts. Let the silence fold you into the rhythm of the world. You are safe. You are known. You are part of the pattern. And now, as your body sinks a little deeper into your pillow and the last pieces of the day float quietly away, let the images of gods and storms and whispered prayers dissolve into something softer. You've traveled far tonight, walked between legends, heard the old names, sat beside thrones, watched the first spark of fire and the last beat of a battle long faded. But now none of that asks anything of you. You don't need to remember it all. You don't need to carry it. You only need to rest. The world outside is quiet. The hearth is warm. The stars just beginning to sing above you have taken up the stories now. Let them hold it for a while. Let the sky keep the memories safe. Your breath steady and slow is the only rhythm that matters now. In, out, like the waves Poseidon watches, like the wind Hestia listens to. You are part of it, and you are home. Tonight, you are not alone. The myths are folded beside you like blankets. The old voices speak only in comfort now. No thrones to climb, no battles to win, no thunder to fear. Just a soft, endless hush, a welcome, a lullaby, a whisper sleep. Sleep well. Sleep deep. The gods are watching over you, and they are tired too.